Welcome to Splice Splatter, the film podcast presented by the Jean Cocteau Cinema, where classic horror
meets modern gore.
Ooh, you did get the voice. I love
it. Switching things up.
Switching things up a little bit. We're your hosts.
I'm Al.
And I'm Siena. And Al, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about some body gore today.
Yes. The king of body horror.
King. That's how I put him in my notes as well. The king of body gore. Yeah. We're talking about two Cronenberg films today.
Cronenberg the elder, not Cronenberg the younger.
Not the younger, although
also incredible.
Great.
Although in very different ways from his dad.
Yes.
I feel like. I think he's I don't know. Have you seen Infinity Pool?
Oh, yes, I have.
Oh, my God. One of the best movies to come out this year, first of all.
Yeah.
But secondly,
our queen.
Our scream queen.
She is.
America's sweetheart.
I know.
America's
so
screaming
She's like the
sweetheart.
modern day, like Shelley Duvall is how I see her.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
I don't know.
That.
There's something about her that's just like so sweet and endearing, but she also is like so good at horror.
I think it's in the eyes because to me the really impactful thing about Shelley Duvall's performances is all in those extremely big doughy eyes and what she does with them. And I think there's something very similar with Mia Goth's face and with the way she uses her eyes.
She's so good. So excited for Maxine to come out.
Yes. I actually, this is blasphemy, but I haven't seen Pearl yet. I saw X in theaters and loved it. But I know.
Well,
and obviously,
great.
like I see TikToks of it like every day.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it.
Well,
yet,
let me know when you watch it, because what a
will.
Treat that you still get to watch it for the first time.
Maybe we should do an episode on it so that we can talk about my first time.
Yeah, your first time. Siena's first time.
Oh, no.
Different story.
What films are we discussing today, Al?
So I'm talking about eXistenZ, which came out in 1999.
And I am talking about 1983's Videodrome. And these are very much, they're sister films, right? They're clearly, I mean, even I watched eXistenZ on the Criterion Collection. I just almost called it the Cronenberg Collection.
The Cronenberg Collection, which is also a collection.
I mean, yeah, I would subscribe to that channel. But even in the description on the Criterion Collection, I think it says like this is the spiritual successor to Videodrome.
Yeah. Yep.
Which you definitely, especially. Did you also watch them back to back?
Yes, I watched, which I realized, again, I should have watched eXistenZ after, but I watched it first.
Oh,
I wanted
interesting.
To do my notes.
Yeah,
I'm going to be honest. I wanted to enjoy the second half.
The easy one for last.
But yeah, back to back. Also,
powerful experience.
Well, also just got a brand new 70-inch TV, so I got to see it just bigger than life.
So fancy.
I mean, it was cheap, but like I was like, oh, this was the time I'm going to watch these films back to back, is on this huge screen.
What a great way to inaugurate it, though. That's perfect. Now it's been christened.
It has
christened by Cronenberg
and
Cronen christened.
Cronen christened.
I'm so sorry
by
I did that to you. That was cruel
just
of me.
Just a big, gory cross.
Yeah, there you
out
go.
Of flesh and teeth. Yeah.
Wait, so I'm trying to decide if I want to give you my tidbit first or get into the viewing experience first. Which do you prefer?
Tidbit.
Okay. Bit tid. So I was looking for Cronenberg specific tidbits, and this morning actually, I got here a little bit before you, and I found out that did you see 2021's Halloween Kills by any chance?
I did not.
I haven't seen anything about. I haven't seen it yet either. But apparently, the original version of the script featured a character performing a musical theater version of a Cronenberg movie.
No,
which is just like, again, we talked a couple episodes ago about how much we love like when horror directors reference other horror directors in their movies. But like, what an Easter egg! Imagine a stage musical of Cronenberg.
Anyone listening out there,
I would pay good money for that. I really would. It would
never make it to any big stage.
Oh no,
it would be shut down immediately.
It would get. I feel like terrible reviews too.
It's just a fever dream on stage.
I feel like maybe this is our version of The Producers.
It totally. We'll fund this. If anyone's interested in writing that script, we'll go. Cronenberg, you there?
Yeah,
hello,
somebody
pick up. That's
So
incredible.
there's
How fun.
I know. So there's my bit tid for you. It was 2007's Eastern Promises, which I haven't seen yet. It's a lesser known Cronenberg.
Yeah.
But
so I've only seen a few. That's a fun one.
Yeah,
oh man, we both gotta watch Halloween Kills now.
Yeah, we really do. Another one of the modern ones to add that we should find an earlier pairing to
on the list. Let me type on the list.
Ooh, that's such a satisfying noise. Love
Just
that.
did my claws last night. That's why.
Gorgeous, darling, gorgeous. So yeah, tell me more about your viewing experience. Did you? So you watched eXistenZ.
I watched eXistenZ first. I had watched both of these in college, and I was on my computer earlier today trying to see if I could find my papers about these films. Could not, but found some other really good ones. I have a whole paper about Jurassic Park.
Oh my gosh, I would love to read that.
Oh, I'll send it,
please.
But yeah, so I had watched these in college. I think in like a sci-fi movie class. And so that was my first, was like in a theater watching with like a bunch of people. And then this time around, it was kind of fun to watch them back to back because these are my two favorite Cronenbergs. I haven't seen a ton, to be fair. Anyways, these are my two favorites I always go back to.
What are some of the others you've seen? If you don't mind me interrupting.
I saw Naked Lunch, and then
I haven't seen that yet. I
love the book.
I do too, and I need to see it.
But. And then The Fly.
Obviously. Oh yeah,
which is why I call every fly. Someone in the office the other day, they're like, "Why did you name that fly like flying around the office?" I was
How can you not?
It's Jeffrey Goldblum from The Fly.
Oh, he's so hot,
obviously. So watching...
you were calling the fly Jeffrey, weren't you? Because I should have picked up on that. That's so funny.
People just clearly, I think, let me get away with it, and they're like, "Okay,
I
crazy."
didn't question it at all. I did.
Yeah, Jeffrey Goldblums, they're just everywhere. That's why I feel bad about killing them.
Have you seen the Brood?
I think those are the only 4 I've seen.
Oh wow! Yeah, I love the Brood. Love Scanners. Love oh my gosh, Dead Ringers is Cronenberg, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I adore Dead Ringers, and I haven't seen the new series adaptation of it.
There's a new series?
Yeah, it's I think the past couple years. I want to say it's an Amazon Prime original. Of course. And it's, I think, starring Rachel Weisz is in the Jeremy Irons role, which is an interesting adaptation. But I don't think you can beat that original.
Yeah. Of course.
I'm very obsessed.
How was the viewing? So it was just fun to revisit because I love these. I've watched these movies a bunch of times. But what about you?
It was my first time seeing eXistenZ. I've seen Videodrome probably 4 or 5 times, something like that. Okay. And interestingly, the first couple of times I saw it, it didn't sit right with me. Like I had trouble getting into it. He's an acquired taste, right?
It's acquired taste, and that one's a little more chaotic in some ways. I feel like
it's not. It's a messy movie.
It's a messy movie
in a way that I love, and like I don't say that as an insult to the filmmaking. Yeah. It's like, this is body horror. Of course, it's messy. I think it makes sense that like the form fits the function. Yeah. But it's definitely. It took me a while to get on its wavelength, and then this time revisiting it, I was like, okay, this is maybe now one of my top 10 horrors of all time. Like this, nice. It really, like, fully kind of came around this viewing, and I was like, oh, it just worked for me on a whole different level.
Oh, cool.
So it was a great experience. I also had a haunting in my house in the midst of the viewing experience.
Go on.
I thought you might enjoy this.
Oh, I can't wait.
I've never had this happen before, and it startled me so much that I immediately texted like my best friend, my mom. Shit. Like, I tried to film it. I couldn't get my camera out in time, but I had just finished watching Videodrome. Oh, I put on the first 5 minutes of eXistenZ, and I hear music playing from the other room. And I'm like, what's that? It's just me and my cat in the house.
No other TVs or
no other I don't even own a TV.
Oh. There was a time where I didn't own one for a while either. I had a record player in place.
I also have a record player. No TV, no anything. Record player's turned off. And I'm like, where the fuck is this music? My phone is next to me. It's coming from the other room. I run into the living room. I'm looking around.
Good for you, going forth.
Oh yeah. This is, I mean, I would die in a horror movie. And I realize my grandfather's music box is playing. And I whip out my phone to try and film it, and it winds down. Of course it does, right?
He's like, no filming, please, without consent.
But for like, that would be my Zadie, R.I.P. But yeah, his old metal, it's like shaped like a grand piano, and this old silver music box had just started playing from the other room. And
has it ever done that prior?
Never before or since. So I don't know what that means, but clearly I was in a zone watching these movies. Yeah.
Is it real reality or is it?
No.
We're in a game.
It's what's the one? Transcendence at the end of it. Yeah. We're in Transcendence.
That's so spooky.
Yeah. So I had a really good viewing experience that really added. Like, I wasn't.
That's a nice little cap on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I wasn't really scared by it. I was like really delighted. Yeah. Yeah. It felt like a positive energy. But
yeah. How cool. Oh, I love those experiences.
Yeah. Do you have any other viewing experience tidbits before we dive in?
No. Just, watched it on big screen. There was a lot of real up close in your face moments, which was great.
I really shouldn't. I heated up my lunch at exactly the wrong moment.
Oh, wait, I ate through both of these, so yeah.
Such a bad idea.
As long as it doesn't look fleshy. I'm vegetarian, so I was good. I was safe.
You're much safer in that case. I feel like we should probably do Videodrome first, just because it's the...
It kind of worked out. I think I went first last time, too.
That's true.
And this came out first.
Oh, look at that. And it's the 40th anniversary this year of Videodrome, too. So we've got another anniversary after Ringu 2 weeks ago. Obviously directed by David Cronenberg, stars James Woods, who is also in Oppenheimer this year, which I'd forgotten about. Virgin Suicides, love his performance in that.
Me
too. Casino, Salvador, Sonia Smits, and Debbie Harry of Blondie fame.
Which I have to pause you for 2 seconds.
Please. Please pause.
I was looking at her and I was like, Michelle Pfeiffer, because I don't know why I forgot.
They do look quite similar.
I looked side by side.
It's the nose.
I mean, they look like sisters.
That's so funny.
And I was like, who is that? It's not Michelle Pfeiffer. I know that.
And this was her first film role too. So
that makes sense.
Which hilarious little tidbit about her casting. She wanted to kind of expand outside of. She describes it as like this popsy persona that she was known as, which first of all, that's not how I think of Blondie.
Icon. I wouldn't even put a genre, just icon.
Yeah, and like fierce too, not like popsy. But she wanted to break out of how she felt she was being perceived, and so she decided to branch into acting. But at the time, she was looking for a comedy role. She thought that was going to be her route into.
Well, she didn't find it.
She did not find it.
But what a great role to go opposite of.
Right? And like, sure isn't popsy.
No.
And I love her performance most out of the movie, out of all the performances. She's incredible. I also think she has, interestingly, by far the most naturalistic acting style.
Yeah, in a world of a lot of camp in both of these films, I feel like she was a lot more realistic.
I love me some camp, but James Woods is very much a whole other style of acting from what Debbie Harry is doing, and it's interesting seeing them playing opposite each other because of that, because it almost feels like it's kind of one of those they're in different movies almost moments. Let's see, a little bit of background. Apparently the idea for this story came from Cronenberg's own childhood experiences. He grew up in Toronto, and he used to, like, late at night pirate TV channels from Buffalo, New York, because Canadian TV cut off earlier. So there was no more Canadian TV left. All he could do was pirate these signals coming from Buffalo. And he always had this little kind of like fear in the back of his head that he might see something horrible come onto the screen that wasn't meant for public consumption.
Did you ever have that as a kid? Like, one day I'm gonna like see something weird on a wrong channel?
I never did, but I think that's where this is a story for another time. But I first saw a dead body at the age of 7, so I think past that
you
point,
just casually dropped that in here.
we'll come back to that at a later podcast. But
maybe in therapy.
My mom, who again she had a little appearance on last podcast. We were talking about my like early horror experiences, and she told me that her first memory of me watching something scary when I was like 5 years old. She showed me the first Harry Potter movie, and you know how like Quirrell's head, there's like the scary turban, like Voldemort's in the back of his head thing going on. My mom was super freaked out watching that and tried to cover my eyes, and I like pulled her hands off and just started giggling at the screen.
Oh, funny.
So that's
the flight delight response to fear that we discovered.
Yeah, Siena, so I guess we both have the delight.
We have the delight.
We have the delight. But
so funny. It was terrifying as a kid. So.
Yeah. So in answer to your question, I didn't have that specific fear, but you did?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I also used to have an old TV because I had so many. Everything I had was like hand-me-down. So I had like the old one where you had to go up to the dial and like click it and play with the antenna.
Oh, that's so satisfying.
I used to wrap foil around it. And again, like I grew up in the 90s, so I shouldn't have had to do that. But again, hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
And so I was like one day, and I think I always had this lust for mystery as a child.
Ooh, what a great way of putting that.
So I was like looking for that kind of stuff. I would make up stories of like my neighbors were witches and they were killing people in the neighborhood.
Oh yeah,
and
same.
So.
Yeah, 100% there. So Cronenberg had this in common with you. He had this fear of seeing something that he wasn't meant to see, which I think is this very like, kind of visceral, almost like Freudian type of fear.
Base fear.
It's a very base fear. That's a great way of putting it. Which I thought was also kind of like an interesting tie into last week's episode. This fear of seeing something you're not meant to see with Ringo and Vacancy too. Feels like there's some. I know we said this at the end of last week's episode, but all of these films are very much in conversation with each other.
Yeah.
And Cronenberg's given interviews talking about how much. I found a quote from him. He's obsessed with dark things and other people's fascinations with dark things, plus the idea of people locking themselves in a room and turning a key on a television set so they can watch something extremely dark, and by doing that, allowing themselves to explore their fascinations.
Oh,
so
I love that quote.
Isn't that
He's
beautiful?
Great with quotes, by the way. I have some in mind too.
Oh,
and he really like pulls out these.
He's
very
a
thoughtful,
very thoughtful and very quotable man for sure. But I love that he's so much. I think he's a very audience-oriented director. He's very much like thinking about the experience of viewing, and there obviously in both of these films there are so many meta elements, and so it makes sense that that's the like primordial ooze that these stories are emerging from.
Primordial ooze, band name.
Yes, we have to have at least one every episode.
Primordial ooze.
Primordial ooze is a good one.
Done.
Yeah,
that's the new one.
What genre is that?
Metal, black metal.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Or progressive metal.
Oh,
maybe progressive.
Love some prog metal.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the first iteration of Videodrome was a treatment that Cronenberg wrote called Network of Blood, which I think is a great title.
That's great.
Videodrome is wonderful too, but I almost wish he'd used Network of Blood for something, even if not for this. He wrote that in the 70s. It's kind of about rich people subscribing to a disturbing private TV network, so you can see some of the seeds of that idea.
Well, even like Squid Game, like modern shows like Squid Game, it's rich people watching these fucked up things. So.
And he also kind of developed the ideas a little bit further in this late 70s, I think 77, episode of the Canadian show Peep Show, where he wrote an episode called The Victim that's about kind of a similar story about sort of an underground violent TV network. The budget was about $5.5 million US, which is
small.
It's pretty small given the quality of those special effects, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about. This film kind of took advantage of Canada's tax shelter policies. I believe it was, I have a note saying that it was one of the last ones I think that Cronenberg did, according to this website, that used those policies, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but it interested me because that sort of using tax incentives to fund movies is a big part of why we have the film industry here in New Mexico that we
Michigan too. I remember growing up and like right when I went to college, a bunch of films moved to Michigan because of the tax incentive there. Yeah.
Which
not so much anymore, I don't think.
Yeah,
because they were like, they get more.
It's so competitive in the States because different states will try and outdo each other with their programs. But it's interesting to me because a lot of the time, those are kind of the places that you see interesting indie films coming out of. Because again, this isn't
they can
that
afford.
big of a budget. Yeah. But it was not a financial success. It earned about $2 million against that budget, so less than half of just the production costs alone, because we don't know how much they spent on marketing. And interestingly, he made it coming off 1981's Scanners, which was like a huge hit, and did so well for him that in order to make this film, he turned down Return of the Jedi. He'd been offered Return of the Jedi and was like, you know what? I'm not used to telling other people's stories, which I think is particularly fascinating.
What would it have
I know. I was thinking
again,
the same.
he's so good with like I not to jump into my notes, but
no, please. Again, these are so in conversation.
The special effects supervisor that he's worked with a few times actually did special effects on Return of the Jedi. So yeah, that would make Marion.
I mean, it would be so much grosser, right?
I just wonder, it would have been a little bit more brutal. I mean, I'm sure the studio would have made sure it was a certain way, but
which
cool.
Yeah,
that's cool to think about.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah,
and so he turned down Return of the Jedi and instead made this absolute financial flop that goes on to become like one of the most famous genre-defining films of all time. Which
it's like good. I'm glad he stuck to his guns.
Me too. I mean, out of all the films you could say stick to their guns, Videodrome is pretty top of the list.
The gristle gun, like eXistenZ.
Speaking of guns, this is one of the grosser behind the scenes facts that I discovered.
Okay,
about
go for it. Hit me.
So the original version of this is jumping ahead a little bit, but the original version of the like arm gun that he uses at the end of the movie was supposed to have eyes, mouth, and foreskin.
Of course.
Yeah. Which is like
I was like, what's the third one, baby?
Yeah. It's so Cronenberg. But apparently this was the special effects designer's idea, and he took it to Cronenberg, and even Cronenberg was like, I think that may be a little much. Which if you've gone so far that Cronenberg is saying it's a little much, like
I wonder what the sketches looked like for that. Like if those exist online.
I feel like I can picture it all too
real
clearly.
Deep. No, you don't want to go deep on the web.
I don't want to go any deeper than I already am. But clearly he's got some interesting gun designs. We'll put it that way and come back to that for eXistenZ. But let's see. The production period was about 2 months, and the entire first week they spent just shooting the TV inserts, which is, I think, a fascinating place to start, and kind of also similar to last episode with Vacancy, where they shot
that first.
So interesting little kind of parallel there. And apparently the cinematographer was really off-put shooting that stuff because he was so used to working with film, and he hated working with video because the framing was different, and he hated the color profile, which I
kind of just gotta go for it and let it be.
But the third reason was that he got nervous having other crew members be able to see how he was framing his shots instead of having privacy to it. And I was like, oh man, he would have hated making movies today with Video Village, where you can see everything that's being shot.
Thing to be. Like someone's gonna see it anyways.
That's kind of the point, sir, of
it is
making a
visual
movie.
medium. So okay. Well, he got over his fear. Great.
So or did he? And the first draft of the script included way more cancer deaths. I think there were 6 characters who died of cancer instead of 2.
Two's good.
Two's about as much as you can take. There were characters melting, which I really wish you could have seen that.
Melting. I love a good flesh melt on screen.
Yeah. Well, and especially like from Cronenberg, the
even the, again, not to jump ahead, but like the end special effects. It's just like more, please.
So good. I know. Cool. Always more. there was a scene where the James Woods and Debbie Harry characters kiss and melt across the floor, and then their like melted bodies like attach to another person, and then that person melts too. And they were just like, this is gonna cost me a little bit more. I was gonna say that
sounds real hard to make.
I mean,
like, I can't even.
I can't even picture it.
No,
which like does
without
make me
doing
really
CG or anything like that.
Yeah. Again, in 1983.
Yeah.
So
good concept though.
I really maybe now someday somebody can go back and steal that idea from him since it didn't get used. Maybe baby Cronenberg.
Baby Cronenberg.
Cronenbaby, yeah.
Cronenbaby.
One of the producers joked that the original script would have gotten a XXX rating, which I kind of would like to see that version. And I found a Cronenberg quote about it. Actually, he said, "I had written it in a more extreme fashion than I would have wanted to see it on the screen myself." Which again, like for him to say that.
Yeah, and he's like, I gotta pull it back. It's okay. Yeah. Good on him though, because I feel like that's really hard for someone who does such an extreme format already. Mm-hmm. He's still, and I think that's why his stuff's so good. It's because he does pull himself.
He has
back.
A line he won't cross, which is really interesting.
Because you wouldn't think, a normal person wouldn't think.
Like, but I think he's, to me at least, I feel like he's drawing that line in the right place because it's effective. It's just enough. I think any more and you would tune out from it.
I don't think the point would get there.
Exactly.
It would just be excessive with again with no back end to it.
Exactly. There was also a novelization of the movie, which I thought was interesting. And it included a scene that had been in the script but got deleted before production, where Max's TV emerges from the bathtub like Botticelli's Birth of Venus. And they'd gone so far that they'd actually like waterproofed a TV set for this, and Cronenberg was like, nah. And they apparently called it like Black Tuesday, the day that he gave them the news that they weren't going to use the Botticelli Birth of the TV scene.
How cool would that have been?
I know. I really kind of want to see
they could have just. They don't have to waterproof a TV. They could have just.
Yeah, I have questions about why that was the first approach.
That's fine.
Yeah. Well,
very cool. That imagery would have been really sick.
Yeah. So I wanted to share that so that you could at least picture it. I just realized that I've not yet given my summary, which is a little embarrassing. I'd wanted to get to that earlier, but
what's Videodrome about, Siena?
Videodrome stars James Woods as Max Wren, who's the president of a UHF station called Civic TV, which is based on an actual station in Canada. He stumbles across Videodrome, which is a snuff TV show depicting people being tortured and murdered. And as he kind of obsessively searches for the source of this broadcast, he encounters Debbie Harry's very kinky radio host, Nikki Brand, a vast political conspiracy, and a broadcast signal which produces brain tumors. Long live the new flesh.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm there's so many places to dive into this.
I know.
movie.
I had trouble with my notes too. I'm like, I have bullet points of like sections, so I just like go for it. I'll follow you along.
Follow me along. Andy Warhol dubbed this the Clockwork Orange of the 1980s, which I thought is
that's just so weird to think about him watching,
isn't it?
But
film. it makes sense that this would be up Andy Warhol's alley, right? Especially, I think it's a very apt comparison in a lot of ways, even though I think this is I think of Clockwork Orange as a very like restrained filmmaking approach, and this is very Cronenberg is kind of playing pretty fast and loose here, in my opinion. On the other hand of the viewer experience spectrum, James Woods' mom hates this movie.
Well, yeah.
She says, "I'm sure there's some kind of message here, but honestly, it's silly. It's bullshit."
Did you say silly?
It's silly. It's silly. It's bullshit.
His mom would be like, "That's silly." All the word.
Yeah.
She's not wrong.
I mean,
it is silly.
It's
playful.
Playful. I think that to me separates a lot of like the experience as somebody who at first didn't enjoy Cronenberg and then started enjoying it. I think a lot of it is whether you're on board or not with the silliness of it.
Were you, when you first saw any Cronenberg film, you were like, no?
I think, let's see, I liked Dead Ringers off the bat, but Videodrome I had like an intensely negative reaction to it first, which is really...
Yeah, you really got to buckle in for the ride. You have to know what you're getting into and just be like, this is the ride.
And I think a lot of it was like realizing how much he's not taking himself seriously, which I think
he's just having fun.
He's just having fun, and I think that comes to the surface a lot more in eXistenZ when we get to it, where like he's so clearly poking fun at the genre and himself and everything he's doing, but you see the seeds of that here in Videodrome, and to me that was kind of like the key to being able to enjoy it, to like unlocking that TV and seeing what's on the creepy channel. Was realizing that there is that sense of silliness. So let's talk about the special effects.
Yes, please.
Was yours also Rick Baker who did the special effects?
Mine, there was a whole slew of people, and I kind of just
sure
extracted the main person was I had Jim Isaac was on eXistenZ, which he did Naked Lunch and The Fly.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, different lead special effects. At least this was the person that I pulled from. He was the supervisor. So
this one was Rick Baker also did everything from Men in Black to the US version of The Ring, which I thought was fun. Also did How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey version. So I get to sneak a little Jim Carrey reference in again. I'm going to try to do as often as possible.
Makeup.
Oh, I know. It's incredible.
So expressive. God, I wish we could just do a Grinch episode.
Maybe we do that as like a Patreon bonus or something. Wow, it is cool. There is something horrifying about it. Yeah. So but obviously, like, just hearing that list of films, he's a latex guy.
Yeah.
He is a specialist in those kinds of old school mask constructions. So like, as an example, I watched a couple behind the scenes videos on this where you could see footage of him working on the props for this film.
Wow, cool.
And for like the flesh gun that James Woods grows, he built a series of sculptures of different points in the gun's transformation. Which just the sheer amount of labor that goes into that just stunned me. For the slit in the stomach,
that was my favorite one. It was applied so seamlessly.
It
really looks like he's
does. This was my first time being able to kind of even see the special effects at all, and it was only because I'd done my research on the film before watching it, so I knew how they'd done it.
Cool.
Every other time I'd watched it, I was just completely mystified. And what they what they had to do was build a latex chest, and have James Woods' actual body in the couch behind him.
Oh, because I was like, the man is so skinny. Is that just how they got away with it? Is they put it on, but because he was
That's
so
what
skinny
I thought as well. That's what I thought as well. But no, he's back in the couch, and I guess like his arms are sticking out of it, kind of like Danny DeVito in Always Sunny climbing out of the couch type of situation going on. And he absolutely hated it and said like, I'm never gonna do a film that requires me to wear latex again.
I can only imagine. I would feel really claustrophobic, to be fair. I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, I don't think I could have latex in my face.
Oh
like that.
No. Well,
Heidi Klum with her Halloween costumes. I'm like,
she is
the worm.
She is so
the earthworm.
Oh my god!
The fact that she was just pinned down in there,
horrifying,
just writhing around to the ground,
a literal nightmare.
I would be dying.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that woman
I
has
feel
a mental fortitude I will never understand. But I'm glad you said that, because it gave me a chance to find the James Wood quote that I was looking for about his experience in the flesh suit. Because he was so angry at this prosthetic that one day on set he just completely lost his shit and started yelling, "I am not an actor anymore. I'm just the bearer of the slit."
As a bearer of no. That is
isn't that
poor buddy
incredible?
Oh man. Did everyone was like, okay, let's take 5?
Okay, well, I think the bearer of the slit needs a little break.
I don't think I'm ever gonna recover from this quote. Yeah, probably like he's never gonna recover from that
from bearing the slit. Yeah, the note that I wrote in response to that was, that's the most actor thing I have ever heard.
It is very actor. That's such a good quote.
I'm not an actor anymore. I'm just the bearer of the slit.
Everyone was like, please go sit in your trailer for 5 minutes.
He nicknamed the flesh gun too. He called it the pooperoo, which I hate.
The pooperoo? Like a superoo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does he have something against superoos?
I have James Woods issues.
Yeah. He would have issues with us too, I think.
Probably true. As
Oh my
bears of the
God.
sled.
Can you imagine screaming that on set? Sorry.
How would anybody on the crew be able to look him in the eye
I would have gotten fired that day.
That would be it.
That's the end of my career. Yeah, just gotta go.
I'm out.
I'm never gonna watch that scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm gonna scream.
The bearer of the slit.
The bearer of the slit. We need to get t-shirts
what a
made.
Character. I know. Oh my gosh, that's our new podcast merch.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Who would
you
buy
could come
it?
up
Let
with
us know. Nobody.
Just us.
We got Warren's raising his hand. Love you, Warren.
Fantastic. I'm
We have
so
one
glad we have your support.
Moving on, I guess. How do we from that?
James Woods, what a character.
Yeah.
What a guy. He also, I found this great interview with him talking about why he did the film, which is particularly funny. Kind of in the context of hearing how miserable he was on set. He tries to put a good face on it on the other side of it. But he says that, he was really attracted to it because of who Cronenberg himself is.
Really? That's a compliment.
Yeah, which is interesting because he said that, he's this extremely kind of soft-spoken, very polite, very shy guy with a very sweet wife and family and kids who grew up to be Brandon Cronenberg.
Yeah.
But that kind of the only tell that there's anything going on under the surface is that he likes racing cars.
Really?
Which I thought was an interesting little preview of Crash, which he goes on to make in the 90s, which is another Cronenberg film that I hated at first and went on to think is one of the best things ever made.
Yeah, not Crash, the one that I was thinking of that day.
Not the Crash you were thinking of. Have you seen the
I have not.
Cronen Crash?
I want to. Yeah, I want to. It was actually
referenced.
It was referenced in eXistenZ too.
Oh, interesting. That kind of tracks.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on the reference, but there were also apparently Cronenberg himself actually served as Wood's stunt double for the scene where he puts the kind of VR helmet over his head because
the one that looked like it looked like the Saw helmet.
Yes,
that's what I wrote.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
Mm-hmm. So that's
him.
That's Cronenberg. That's the director because James Woods was scared of getting electrocuted.
Oh gosh. Well, he was going through it. It sounds like.
He was the bearer of the slit. He was having a hard time.
He had a lot to hold.
To bear.
That's so funny.
And there were originally 3 different endings. The one that we see is actually attributed to James Woods. He was apparently the one who came up with the idea of Max seeing the video of himself shooting himself, saying so "Long live the new Flash."
I love that ending.
It's a perfect ending.
Yeah.
So clearly, he was able to get on Cronenberg's wavelength by some point in the filming process.
Very cool.
But the other 2 endings kind of went a little bit farther in time beyond his suicide. The idea of him committing suicide was always there. But there was going to be another version. It's such classic Cronenberg shit. One of the alternates included Max, Bianca, and Nikki all appearing on the Videodrome set with slits in their chest that were like birthing genitals. Which yeah, I know. I
think James knew it was.
I think James Woods actually had the right instinct in this case. But they had actually made all of the prosthetic genitals for that scene and had them shipped to Cronenberg, and Cronenberg took a look at them and was like,
he's like, "Ooh, mail day. Let me see what I got."
And he was apparently happy with how they turned out. He was just like, I'm not feeling it today.
Yeah. Let me box up these genitals real quick. Ship them off. Who wants one?
Does anybody want to be the bearer of the slit?
Yeah. Who wants a slit?
This episode is definitely earning us our.
Yeah, I think we need to have a little warning for people.
This one's getting the XXX that he was talking about. And the tape that he inserts in his stomach was actually a Betamax tape because VHSs were too big.
Oh.
Too big for the slit. Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Size does matter.
It does matter. Glad that there are Betamaxes out there for the folks who need them.
Need a smaller tape.
And need a smaller tape. Also, this one and eXistenZ were both composed by Howard Shore, who was a buddy of Cronenberg's.
Oh, very cool.
And the idea for the soundtrack was to kind of replicate Max's descent into the world of Videodrome and the hallucinations of Videodrome by starting with this very traditional cinematic score and then incorporating more and more electronic elements as it went on. But essentially he composed a soundtrack for an orchestra and then programmed it into a synth. To create this sort of in-between musical space where you don't kind of fully know what's real and what's not, which I thought really
Very cool.
adds something to the experience. And let's see. Obviously, the MPAA had plenty of requests for cuts when the time came to.
No, they did.
I know, shocking. When the time came to get the rating for the film, but actually, so did Universal, which was the distributor, and studio head Bob Remy asked for remember early in the film there's the sequence, the Samurai Dreams sequence where you're seeing the softcore tape that Masha's brought in.
Yes.
Bob Remy asked for the dildo scene from Samurai Dreams to be removed, and Cronenberg was like, why would he want that? The MPAA actually didn't have any issue with that. That wasn't one of the scenes they requested cut. And so he kind of asked around some of the other Universal bigwigs, and one of them told him, oh, don't worry about it, it's not you. Remy just has, quote, a problem with cocks.
Oh, well, that sounds like his problem.
That sounds like his problem. Also, I feel like if you've got that problem, you shouldn't be making films with David Cronenberg.
Yeah.
To be
like,
honest,
wrong dude.
Wrong
you
director.
Right now.
Yeah.
Imagine having other people say
that you have a problem
in a professional setting.
Professional context.
I'd be like, don't tell anybody. No one needs to know this. I'm going to keep this in.
For that to be your reputation among your colleagues.
Yikes.
He's the one with a problem with cocks.
Oh,
yeah.
No. Yeah, him.
Yeah. So that's those are my production facts for you.
Fun.
Let's dive into talking about the experience of the film itself, thoughts on it, notes from the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get in there.
My first quote that I wrote down from it was the in kind of the response scene to Samurai Dreams. I love the fellow exec who says it's not tacky enough to turn me on. I think that tells you so much about Cronenberg. It's a great line. It really, I think, prepares you for the film you're going on to watch, because I think, again, that's part of what I love about Cronenberg is that he is consciously and intentionally tacky, and like embraces and rolls around in the filth of that, which I think is, I wish we had more filmmakers who do that. I think it's, to me, that's a lot of the joy of horror as a genre too. I think also that's the first scene to me where the homoeroticism of this movie starts really coming to the fore, because he's talking about how much he doesn't want soft stuff. He wants stuff that feels harder. And
there's a lot of that in both of these films.
Very, very, and in a lot of Cronenberg in general. There's kind of like this undertone of that. But I think particularly in these two, and particularly watching them back to back, that definitely
you're like,
comes a lot to the front.
Yes.
How do you feel Max comes across in the TV interview that he does with Debbie Harry and with Professor Oblivion? You're like, Sienna, what are you asking me?
What are you asking me? Trick question?
Like, are we meant to see his appearance on that show as successful? Because I was watching it and I was thinking, he doesn't come across to me as a viewer as articulate or well prepared. He's just kind of an asshole who barges in and talks over everybody. And I was trying to tell how much of that is what the filmmaker wants us to think of the character and how much of that is my perception as a modern viewer.
Oh, I don't think it's perception.
Okay, so you feel like we're not supposed to like Max, I guess is kind of the underlying
I don't
question.
like him the whole time, but I think it's just so interesting to watch.
Absolutely.
Just barrel through this whole film.
Love to watch him, love to hate him.
Yeah. No. There's nothing really redeeming.
Yeah.
About him.
Okay, that's
unless we're
that was my perception as well, and it's good to hear that was yours. But I think it was particularly interesting to me because he does feel like such a Cronenberg stand-in. Even just if you look up pictures of David Cronenberg from this period in his career, he's dressed just like Max Wren. Kind of like the physicality. There's a lot of similarities.
Do you think this is just one side of Cronenberg that he was kind of
It feels to me like this is kind of like in that quote I gave from him at the beginning, talking about this fascination with people using watching things as kind of an outlet for these
like this is his dark side.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of seeing the Mr. Hyde to Cronenberg's Jekyll.
Oh yeah, totally. I wonder if that was his kind of drive.
Yeah, which also I felt that a lot with Jude Law as well in eXistenZ too.
Oh yeah, I have some notes on that.
Yeah, so it's interesting, unflattering author inserts in these films. I loved that. I made a note about the lighting in the ear piercing scene with Debbie Harry. I think that
so good.
It's so good, and I think it's the only scene in the entire movie with warm lighting. I think everything else you get is either fluorescence or that very intense TV screen blue.
Yeah.
And that scene has this almost like I made a note of it particularly because there's no on-screen source for that kind of an orangey, almost like firelight kind of lighting.
Do you think it was because it was like through his lens of like Videodrome in that room, that red room kind
of? It
like
felt to me, it felt to me like this is maybe the first moment where we're starting to see the hallucinations creep in.
The bleed?
Yeah, exactly.
Bleed, yeah.
Because I was looking at it and I was like, this shot feels really expressionistic. Why is that? Oh, there's no light source for this light.
He also, right after that, isn't it like he's visually in the Videodrome room?
Exactly.
So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like that's the lighting kind of leads you in, which I thought was wonderful. Also makes it all the funnier that the cinematographer again hated working with that video lighting so much. Because what he achieved was so glorious.
He's like, but this is what I want to do.
I love the double entendre in Nikki Brand's name, that it's like brand as in like marketing branding, but also as in like BDSM branding. Like she's like asking to be branded in the film, which is like such a Cronenberg thing. He loves very on the nose names, which I was very curious about that when we get to Ted Pikel, what that name means, because it's such a...
Oh, did you look this up? I did not.
No, but I want to discuss it a little bit. But anyway, he's got interesting names.
Nikki Brand is a great name.
It's a great name. Let's see. Did you notice that there's a picture of Hitler in a tutu on the wall behind Max's TV?
No.
There's a picture.
There was so much going on, and I noted this too. Like the sets in Videodrome specifically are so robust that I think it's just like I could watch it every time and find it's like an I Spy game.
It really is, and I think I think it's. I'm also pretty sure it's the same production designer for both films too, which is interesting. I don't have her name written down, but I think I noticed that in the credits.
Yeah, she worked on it's Carol Spire. She worked on a lot of his films.
Yeah, I think she's kind of a recurring character in the Cronenberg world. But yeah, there's a picture behind Max's TV, and it actually features quite prominently in the backgrounds of several of the shots of Hitler. It's like I can't remember what the word is, not trick photography, but because obviously this is before Photoshop, but it's like an altered image of Hitler where the top of his body is Hitler giving a speech. The middle third of his body.
Or like collaged. Almost.
Yeah, like a collage. The middle third of his body is like a ballerina tutu, and the bottom third is like goat or insect legs. And it's just this very weird image that I had not noticed on any of my previous 4 watches, but I paused it this time because I was like, is there a swastika in this shot?
Yikes.
And then I was looking and I was like, oh, there's a Hitler in this shot.
Weird.
So, which is like a very...
Well, that's gotta mean something.
It's a telling character detail about Max Wren, at the very least.
At least a sense of humor.
At least a sense of humor. And it's something that clearly Cronenberg was a fan of that detail in the production design. To put it right before the TV in this incredibly TV-centric movie. I also kind of... I'm trying to figure out how to say this in a way that doesn't sound insane. But I think particularly this time, one of the things that I loved the most about the concept behind this film was the idea of like experiencing reality through video hallucination, because I feel like as somebody who not only makes films but watches films so constantly and is so obsessed with film, you do start seeing the world through the lens of movies. And I think this happens to all of us, whether we're professionally in the film world or not, because film and TV and video are such a huge part of our lives that like the format of filmic storytelling becomes like a lens we see the world through. And I think that's something that this film plays with in such delicious, gory, upsetting ways. I also just watching this time, I was thinking, um, he's Cronenberg is a very literary guy. He's talked a lot about how Nabokov is one of his big reference points. And I was thinking this time watching through that I feel like with the idea of a company that makes inexpensive glasses for the third world, missile systems for NATO, and Videodrome, it feels like, first of all, hilarious, but secondly, watching it this time, I was like, oh, this is where Infinite Jest comes from. I think David Foster Wallace must have been a huge Cronenberg nut at the time that he was writing that book. And it also reminds me a lot of the optometrist sign in Great Gatsby, too, where there's kind of that image of eyes looking over you, optometrist's eyes.
I was going to say, even just the quote, it's funny because I was writing it down as it right before it was said in the film, but just the television is the retina of the mind's eye.
Yes. Oh my God.
And just how much you could just sit there and dissect that and put it onto all those things that you did.
Oh my God. And that whole scene at the end with the Medici glasses line, and that, what a bizarre.
What was the line?
The I think it's called the Medici line, the glasses line, that the company is producing.
Yes.
It's, oh my God. I still don't even quite know what to make of that last 10 minutes before the suicide. It is
a lot happens at the end. All of a sudden it just like ramps up and it just goes for it.
And it very much feels like it kind of swerves into almost like an experimental territory. Like it stops feeling like the narrative even matters. And like it's just,
again, the messiness we were talking about.
Yeah, like it's just vibes. It's just vibes.
Just gory vibes.
Love that Max shoots his partner at the company against like an image in the boardroom of a city.
Was that what it was against?
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what was on his hand the whole time. I was like, a microphone?
Oh, interesting. No, it's like on I think it is a bomb in his hand. But yeah, there's that wall of the city in the background, which also, it felt to me like this fun little almost Godzilla reference, where because as the body falls against the city, it's like this kind of, there's this image of infection, which is so much of what Videodrome is about, but also like you get that kind of like depth perception playing. That's
funny. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, such a classic part of, I imagine, a lot of the early horror films that would have influenced Cronenberg.
Yeah.
I could be reading a little too much into that shot, but I thought it was fun.
That's super fun.
There's also so much like Christ imagery with the wounds on the TV screen body right after when Max is finding out that Nikki's been dead this whole time, and this like torso starts protruding out of the TV, which I thought was super interesting.
The water went down.
Sorry, everybody.
We're trying to stay hydrated so we're not scratching.
Indeed. You're giving me more credit than I deserve. This is black coffee.
The dehydration juice went down.
There we go. The dehydration juice. I love that. But I thought it was super interesting because Cronenberg's Jewish, actually. So there's, which as a Jew, I do relate. I feel like there's a lot of like Jewish art made about Christ imagery that is like a weird, super potent thing. But I think one of the last kind of just production notes I made is that it is so hard for me to picture a movie like this getting made with US financing. Like this
then
is
or now?
Both.
Really?
Both.
Yeah. Well, now for sure.
Now for sure. But even then it's like, which I guess we'll get to when we talk about eXistenZ, because that's, I think, a Weinstein production. But it's so just in terms of kind of how how experimental and how fast and loose it plays. There's a sense of freedom to it that just doesn't feel like American film.
Yeah.
And it interests me because I don't know a whole lot about the Canadian film industry or what else.
Yeah, I don't either, actually.
Cronenberg is like the main director that I know and love who came from Canada. But it makes me very curious about kind of what the underlying like film culture is there, because watching it, I very much felt like there's so much that's satirizing the way things happen in the US, but feels not of the US.
Yeah.
I also just, especially in that last scene with the glasses line convention, whatever we want to call it, fashion show, display thingy.
Yeah. That's exactly how I was going to describe it.
This is why they pay me the bucks for my words.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your read on it was, because I couldn't tell how much of the crowd's kind of lack of reaction when Max Wren jumps up on the stage with like a gun. I was like, I was watching it and I was like, how much of this is because it's a hallucination versus because it's the 1980s? Because now, we're so used to mass shooting events that like, I think we all kind of have ingrained in us a certain series of
like we're able to pinpoint before even
exactly. We're used to the imagery of something like that happening, and I feel like the audience members here are just kind of like, huh?
I didn't. Well, and the end of eXistenZ too. There was like a lack of response to that. So I'm assuming, because I think a lot of both these films, I think, have essentially the same, like the reality bleed.
Well said.
So
well said.
I took it as just we're not in
reality,
the real reality.
Yeah, which I think,
but also maybe the 80s. But I think in this context,
fair. Little column A, little column B.
Because in eXistenZ too, I'm just like react. But I'm like, oh, it's not reality.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, and I think that's like, especially in eXistenZ, something that he articulates all the more directly is this idea of like, you're watching a movie, the characters are doing what they're doing because the plot requires them to. And he's kind of poking fun of that, not because this is what would happen in real life. Right. This isn't real life.
Yeah.
And and
even these worlds that these characters live in these films is not, it's like this bigger, weirder world. It's like an alternate universe.
Yes, well said.
So I think in that too,
do you have other Videodrome thoughts before?
Let me see. I got a little list.
Oh,
I got a little list today.
Love a list.
You didn't already talk about everything. Let me see. Give me a second. Play. Do 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 do. Can we do? Is that licensed?
That's probably. Maybe I shouldn't have sung that. we can put a tape sound over that if we need to.
Yeah, I know. I think the only like notes that I kind of put was how the two related, and it was kind of just going off what you were saying, which how they similarly like kind of explore technology might play, how technology plays in living in these dark fantasy worlds.
Totally.
So I think just in that, a lot of my notes now that I'm realizing were just the comparison of the two, the manipulation of technology on reality.
Which also, watching this kind of, we're recording this right after the actors' strike ended, and thank God. Thank fucking God. But especially in the midst of all the AI conversations that have been going on, both films kind of had a different resonance, because even though they're not specifically about that, it's that kind of grappling with new technologies that change the way we think about our own consciousness, I think, in some ways, that really felt like, oh, we're living in very Cronenbergian times at the moment. And that's actually,
these are so applicable to today.
They're so applicable. And I realized the last note that I'd missed earlier, but really wanted to touch on, especially before we jump into eXistenZ. The character of Brian Oblivion, who's kind of like, great name, but also our our source of all things metaphysical media questions, right? He's based on an actual Canadian philosopher named Marshall McLuhan, who's often called kind of the father of media studies. And Cronenberg grew up watching TV interviews of him. Actually went to the University of Toronto at the same time that McLuhan was teaching there. Didn't take his classes though, as far as I could tell. But he's this guy who wrote books with titles like The Mechanical Bride, The Gutenberg Galaxy, and he is. I kind of went into a little mini wormhole researching him yesterday because he's apparently one of the most quotable modern philosophers because he's the guy who Timothy Leary credits him with coining turn on, tune in, drop out, which fascinating. I think that very much feels like the sort of thing that the guy Brian Oblivion is based on would have come up with. He's also the one that Warhol paraphrased when he was talking about 15 minutes of fame. That's also a Marshall McLuhan thing.
This dude's just probably creeped into our lives we didn't even know.
He's also the guy behind The Medium is the Message. So just like incredibly quotable dude.
That are said in daily.
All of the daily things.
The things that just have been around us, quotables that we didn't even know.
If you don't know, it's probably Marshall McLuhan.
Wow, I gotta look this dude up.
Yeah, I had no idea. But it adds a lot to Brian Oblivion and makes him feel like, I mean, obviously he's an incredibly important character, but it really made him feel like kind of the central thesis of the movie is contained in Oblivion.
Cool.
This time.
That. Yeah, Videodrome. Man. What a
Videodrome. What a film. What a film. What a guy. What a Cronenberg.
What a Berg.
What a Berg.
Fun.
Let's dive into our second Berg.
Slide right in. Well,
as Cronenberg would like us to. He loves things going into things.
Yeah, loves a little bit of insertion.
He really does.
So, eXistenZ was Cronenberg's first original screenplay since Videodrome.
Whoa!
Yeah, which is nice.
Oh my gosh, I'm wondering what he did in between there that he didn't write. Interesting.
Naked Lunch.
Oh,
I think that was
that makes sense.
Slathered in there.
Yeah.
So this, it was written and directed by him.
So it makes sense that they would be so in conversation, even with the time gap.
He was like, "Oh, I get to do mine," because I can't math, but 1983 and then now 1999.
Yeah, so
almost
16 years. Yeah,
good math. Good math. I went to film school, and I did art department.
Hey.
So it was written and directed by Cronenberg. Cinematography by I'm going to try so hard to say this, Peter Sachiski.
Possibly another Polish DP after my rant last episode about the glories of Polish director of photography.
Yeah, you did talk about that. So he did
anytime you see an impossible to pronounce DP name, they're probably Polish.
School.
Probably from the Lodz Film School.
Yep. I'm gonna start looking that up now from now on. So I have
watch
that
for
fact.
it. Yeah.
So he did most of Cronenberg's other projects, but was also cinematographer for Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, another Star Wars connection. Look at that.
Yeah, there's 2 Star Wars in here. Shop Girl. I don't know if you ever saw that with Claire Danes, Steve Martin, and Jason Schwartzman.
Three of my faves.
It's a brilliant little indie.
What a weird combo. Interesting. I've got to see that.
He did Tim Burton's Mars Attacks. And then also was the DP for Rocky Horror Picture Show.
No.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Obsessed.
So yeah,
I'm so jealous.
What I wouldn't have resume
given to shoot Tim Curry in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Right? I would be like, I would just lead with that.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yeah. That's retire.
And done.
Yeah, you've peaked.
Production design was by Carol Spire. So she
did. It is the same.
Yeah, so I think it's the same. She also was the production designer on The Santa Claus. Tim Allen's The Santa Claus.
Oh my God.
A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which a few of these people have worked. A lot of his crew actually has worked on things together, I've noticed.
Interesting. I wonder if maybe that's another Canadian production, possibly. Could be that this is all like a Canadian crew.
Yeah. They all seem to like working with each other.
Yeah.
So that, Silent Hill, Pacific Rim, and an episode of Black Mirror.
Interesting.
So kind of
which episode?
Yeah, I didn't look. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fine.
Art direction was by Tamara Deverell. She only actually worked on Crash and eXistenZ as the art director, but she also was art director on Death to Smoochie with Robin Williams.
Amazing.
And the 2000 X-Men.
Oh my God.
And
Interesting.
then was production designer on the new film that just came out, Priscilla.
Oh, I'm dying to see Priscilla.
Yeah, it's getting great reviews.
Have you seen it?
Oh,
well, we'll both need to watch and talk about it, even though we won't talk
Not
about it on this podcast, but yes.
So yeah, was production designer on Priscilla, Star Trek Discovery, and Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. She did all the episodes, which is great. If anyone listening hasn't watched that, it's bingeable.
If you're listening to this, you will like Cabinet of Curiosities.
So good. Yeah. His little shuffle. And then did 15 episodes of Degrassi: The Next Generation. I love finding the one thing the people did that was like not in the genre.
What an icon.
Yes. And then costume designer was Denise Cronenberg, which is his sister, and they worked on like every project together.
Oh, that's so sweet.
She produced The Incredible Hulk.
Whoa.
And produced something else too, but she they've worked together, which I think I saw the name and I was like, wife? No, sister.
That's so cool.
Isn't that sweet?
Oh, I love that.
So all the costumes are her. And then special effects supervisor was Jim Isaac, as I had said, who did Naked Lunch and The Fly, and then also has done Gremlins, Arachnophobia, and Star Wars Jedi Returns.
Got it. Yeah. It makes sense that he would have done Gremlins. That feels like those are from the same mind.
So fun. And it's starring Jennifer Jason Leigh as Allegra Geller.
Mm-hmm.
She is so unlikable in the best way.
Oh,
she plays
love to hate her. Also, the most 90s hairstyle in the world. The zigzag part.
It looks like a wig almost.
It really does.
Adelia's
it might
catalog.
actually be a wig. I'm not 100% sure.
And if you don't recognize her from this, she was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Single White Female.
Mm-hmm.
We have Jude Law as Ted Pickle. Pickle? It's Pickle. But
I'm wondering if it's a fish reference, because pike is a fish.
They do talk about fish.
There's a lot of fish in this movie.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, because I didn't look up the name, but I just...
It's weird.
It's a weird name. And they never call him Ted in it.
It's always Pickle. Yeah. I'm going to Google
which maybe
that.
is kind of... Yeah, Google it while I run through the cast.
Yeah,
So
let's find out
Jude Law, if you don't know him from various projects, AI, Artificial Intelligence, Closer, and everyone's favorite Christmas movie, The Holiday. Which I can't wait to watch. And then we have Ian Holm as Curie. I can't say his last name. He's an alien, Naked Lunch, and of course he's Bilbo Baggins. So,
good. So good.
And then Willem Dafoe as Gas.
Oh.
I love that man has not aged. He just turned old. He just turned that whatever age that is, and he just stopped.
Which also
he was born and then he was that age.
Yeah.
40 ? 40 in the 80s.
Athena style, emerged from the head of his father at age 40.
He just was chiseled from stone and just walked.
He
was never a child.
Yeah, I can only imagine how terrifying the portrait in his attic is, because that man literally looks exactly the same in this movie as
he's been around
today,
for hundreds of years.
Years later. Yes, I buy it.
Me
and
too.
I'm okay with
it. Yeah. Again, I shouldn't have to explain who Willem Dafoe is, but if you do not know him, he's Green Goblin in the Spider-Man films, and then he's in a bunch
I love that that's what you started off with.
Yes, I'm going to list the things I like
Good.
from their resume. From their list of things on IMDb. I get to choose. I'm the one talking on this podcast. And obviously he's in a billion things.
Yes.
Did you find a little fact about Pickle?
I'm still looking.
Okay, cool.
There's a lot of things that came up under the word Pickle, but none of them seem relevant. So it looks like it might be a Malaysian word. I'm going to do more research.
You know what you should look up? If it there were two, which is one of my facts. It's I'll get to it. There were two producers on this film who were
apparently it's a South and
Hungarian.
Oh.
Look up Hungarian in the word Pickle.
Oh, interesting. Apparently it's also South and East Asian unit of weight. Which doesn't feel as relevant to me as fish, perhaps.
We're going to say it's based off fish.
We're going to say it's fish. We're calling it fish.
We're calling it fish.
It's giving fish.
It's giving fish. It's giving pike. So description of, if you haven't seen this movie, so a video game designer, Allegra, who's played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, has created a virtual reality game called eXistenZ. And if you're spelling it stylistically, it's a lowercase e, capital X, ISTEN, capital Z.
Which I love that the movie starts out with that, especially because we had a discussion before watching about how it was pronounced, and then the opening scene is talking about how it's pronounced, and I was like, oh,
yes,
he prepared for
eXistenZ.
us.
Also, so like I just said, two of the producers on this movie were Hungarian, so it's not by chance actually that the X and the Z are capitalized, since the letters between them make the Hungarian word Isten, which I'm sorry if I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, but Isten, which means God.
Whoa, I love
Yeah, isn't that
that.
cool?
Oh, well, especially with like when we hear at the end about more of her titles, and one of them is like Art God. I feel like
Art
that.
God. Yep.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Interesting.
So eXistenZ.
What a good tidbit.
Tidbits. After a crazed fan attempts to kill her, Allegra goes on the run with Ted Pikel, played by Jude Law, a young PR nerd who falls into the role of bodyguard. Poor buddy. In an attempt to save her game, Allegra implants into Pikel's body the video game pod that carries the damaged copy of the game eXistenZ. And Allegra and Pikel engage in a series of experiences that blur the lines between fantasy and reality. And then I kind of put this quote, which is like the tagline, world where fantasy is more real than reality itself. So,
which again, very AI, very our current debates.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of this, I think watching this, again, you watched this for the first time.
Yeah. So that was very much in the forefront of my mind. Yeah.
Because even so, like back then, when did I watch it? So I probably watched it a few years after it came out. So it was just after the 2000s. And that whole kind of, which I noted in here too, is the kind of idea of infection, or even just with technology resetting itself.
Yes. Yeah.
So watching it after, was it even really,
yes,
something that we were talking about then, or just come out of talking of like how technology and we rely on it so much. I remember I don't know if you remember clicking from 1999 into 2000, but just the panic. My parents stocked up on water. We were like, the clocks are all going to reset itself. We're going to lose all this data on every computer all over the world.
I was 3.5. So I don't have clear memories.
Yes, I'm 6 years older than you. So yeah. But yeah, so just even then watching this, and then now with, actually having VR and actually living on our screens.
Seeing these things come to be more, the fantasy becoming more real than the reality.
Yeah. So some history I have for you is it was originally set to begin filming in 1997. It was going to come out then in summer 1998, but due to casting difficulties, they started filming later, and so it was released in 1999.
Which is great timing for it.
Yeah, it kind of worked out that way.
Although
the panic.
I think I read that, didn't it have a less successful release because people kept comparing it unfavorably to The Matrix, which came out the same year?
The Matrix was out. There was also, there were a couple other films that was bumping up against it. 13th Floor and Dark City also came out, but The Matrix was the big one that, especially in reviews from critics like Roger Ebert, they were comparing it to that, and just were like, it's a lesser version of, but there's every article that I read online was like, we need justice for eXistenZ.
Yes,
because people just kind of pushed it down because of that.
Well, and to me, it feels like they're doing different things. Like they're
Completely
about
things.
There are
I also
similar
don't
issues.
like The Matrix.
Ooh, interesting.
Personally.
I'm not.
Oopsies, sorry.
I like it,
not
but
for
I'm
me.
not.
It's not for me.
I'm not like a Matrix obsessive the way a lot of people are.
Clearly they were good, but yeah. So I loved this. Didn't like The Matrix. So
this hit me on an emotional level in the way that The Matrix did not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah. So it got kind of bumped down because of that.
Unjust.
Justice for this. I mean, Cronenberg is so beloved for his style now.
Yeah.
The film's plot came after Cronenberg conducted an interview with Salman Rushdie in Shift magazine in 1995. Yeah, we carry him at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Who was at the time in hiding due to his controversial book, The Satanic Verses. And so Rushdie's dilemma gave Cronenberg the idea of a fatwa, which I wrote down. A fatwa is a ruling on a point of Islamic law given by a recognized authority. So he's on the run.
Thank you for the definition.
Yes, I had to look it up because I wanted to make sure I knew what it was.
My main exposure to the concept is from Salman Rushdie, but honestly more prominently from the Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where he makes the musical fatwa !
So if you want to learn about it, watch that episode. It'll do better than me. But yeah, so that idea gave him the idea for eXistenZ.
Interesting. Yeah. I love thinking about those two pieces of media. On the one hand, fatwa ! And on the other hand, eXistenZ, being both things that emerged from the experience of Salman Rushdie's fatwa.
Inspiration for all.
Truly. What great cultural treasures we've gotten from that.
eXistenZ was originally pitched to MGM, kind of what we were talking about. So they didn't greenlight it due to its complex structure. I'm putting in air quotes. They probably thought it was too gross.
Yeah.
It did, however, get distribution from Dimension Films, was at the time was a subsidiary of Disney through its parent company, Miramax Films.
Which I will also add as a quick little Dimension tidbit. It's also the company that did Scream. But also, every time I hear Dimension, I think about the fact that at Miramax, there was kind of a inside joke behind Bob Weinstein's back because Dimension was Bob Weinstein's company, Miramax was Harvey's company, and it's like Bob's horror pet project. But for up until Scream, it was really not doing very well. Scream was the movie that made it successful, and so people kind of looked down on it within the company and would behind the scenes call it Dementia Films.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
to poke fun at Bob. Yeah. So every time I see the Dimension Films logo, I'm like, Dementia Films. Yeah.
It's never not going to be that for me.
Oh, yeah.
You were saying that Videodrome was $5 million to make. This was $15 million. But they also seem to have grossed the same amount. It only earned $2.8 million. So really did so much worse.
Oh, that's bad. Yeah. That's real bad.
Yeah. So it really suffered.
That breaks my heart.
They gave it a really limited release because of that. And also, like we said, it was up against some other films, specifically The Matrix, which blew everyone
tough competition.
It was also has some novelizations. Christopher Priest wrote a tie-in novel to accompany the film. Same themes, and kind of explored the questions of whether we can trust or believe what our reality is with what our memories are. That came out in 1999. You can buy it online. It's on Amazon, but if you can find it somewhere else, please don't support Amazon if you can.
No Bezos.
And then another in 1999 too, they also had a graphic novel. And Sean Schofield was the publisher of that. And again, it was kind of like a retelling of, and you could find that online everywhere as well.
Interesting. I feel like a lot of the movies we've covered have had novelizations actually, which I hadn't realized.
Yeah, I know Trick or Treat had like spin-off stories.
Ringu is based on a novel, but also had a manga adaptation. There's a novelization of Videodrome. So lots more than I had realized as we went into this, which I would love to.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get Twig on from Beastly to talk about that at some point. Novelizations of horror films. That would be fun.
That'd be super cool. So I kind of, just so you know, I kind of did this similar thing where I broke it down by category. So like my first little bit is about technology and addiction.
Ooh, I love
and kind of following through. Again, I think all of this can really be put on both films that we talked about.
I also have technology as addiction as a note. So
it's I think this whole film kind of serves as a cautionary tale to technology and becoming too addicted to tech. Again, for 1999, I was chronically online at that time, but even now it's just like the idea of having a cell phone in our hands and just our access to technology is so much. It's larger than
essentially
even what it was.
Limitless. Like,
yeah. I mean, unfortunately for me, limitless. It's also, I said it's also interesting because the Y2K and everyone panicking about online existence kind of going away. Totally. So just that panic over
eXistenZ.
Yeah, eXistenZ.
Online eXistenZ.
Crises. So we kind of learn this world, which I think is interesting, through the eyes of someone who is a virgin to technology. It's like, of course, any kind of person that could bring us into this world. I thought it was really interesting that he is so removed from it. And even she pokes fun at it. Like, you're the PR nerd for this, but
which it feels like it's almost an audience insert designed for the least friendly audiences. Like for the audiences that are the least likely to be kind of immersed in this world themselves, right? Like a guide for the people who maybe are Luddites themselves or are scared of this technology, which is an interesting choice.
I always love when films do that too. Having the person that you're following through their lens is the person that's not from that world.
Yes, yeah.
Because you get to, it's also easier for storytelling in general. Right, it's like you don't have to have these exposés on like, this is what this means. It's like you have this person that's
it's a natural guide. Yeah.
And Cronenberg actually had a bunch of terms that he made up for this. So like, the pods and the ports. And so he kind of had his own little language on the set because of it. So again, having a character that we're following through that doesn't know these things allows for this natural introduction.
I feel like that also, there's a fun little tie back to Clockwork Orange there with the Andy Warhol quote, since that's another one where there's such a creation of a language for the world that's being built.
Yeah. So Cronenberg, much like in Clueless, creating his own verbiage.
Everything good always.
Everyone compares those two things together.
I mean, they should. Clockwork Orange and Clueless, a classic combo.
Allegra's game pod was definitely considered a character in this. I don't know if you felt that watching this
very
for the first
much, time. Especially once they call it she and like start kind of assigning traits to it.
Yeah, she calls it baby a couple of times.
It was very sweet.
She gets really concerned when it gets sick. I think not only for her game, but she clearly has this type.
She has an emotional connection to it. Yeah.
Yeah, which both Cronenberg and the actress owned up to, and she was quoted a couple times saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Cronenberg kind of made it so that when she was on set, she felt like she had like a pet dog with her, so she felt this need to like take care of it and cared for it. I think both on and off screen, she created this relationship with the pod.
I'm so curious what it actually felt like to touch, because it's such a tactile prop. It's so much about like her touching the like quote unquote skin on it. I'm very curious what it actually felt like to her to interact with.
And in fact, the fact that it like moved, I don't know if they had to have sound effects on set.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
But the way it moved too, it was very reactive to stuff. And I'm sure people were just, moving it on set. So
it looks very like jelly-ish.
Yeah. I would have not liked it. My sensory issues would have said no thanks.
That's what I was thinking, is like it would take me so long to get myself like sensorially acclimated to this object.
There's a lot of that in both of these films, that even in this one too, when he's eating like the fish.
Oh my God.
That's putting together the gun and his hands are just wet.
I can watch almost anything.
Could never be an actor.
That scene, I literally had to hold my hand up over the fish on the screen
so
that I could just watch Jude Law.
So you probably made Cronenberg really proud at that moment. He was probably really happy about
almost
that.
Nothing gets me like that, man. That even just thinking about it now.
The noise clicking in.
And the texture, and like, man, I just watching that, I kept thinking, what were they giving Jude Law to eat as this prop?
I know. And like, I couldn't find anything on that. I looked it up.
I'm so curious, but like he does such a good job of like at first looking disgusted and then just kind of diving into it. I'm like, I could never.
Yeah, we just don't have a career as being actors. That's okay. That's okay.
I was just about to say this is why we're on the other side of the camera, and then I was like, well, we're not right now. But normally.
Yeah, normally. Absolutely. And then I thought too, I don't know if you felt this way, not only kind of having this relationship, but just a true drug addict response to it. She was really feral over that thing on a level that went past companion and care.
Yeah.
So again, I think that was just the conversation of our addiction to tech at the time, like video games.
Especially because it seems like she takes actions that are not necessarily the best actions for the preservation of the object. Like she's so feral about trying to get at the game that she like, ports into an infected port and stuff, and like she's very willing to take risks in seeking this thing in a way that does feel very like addictive behavior.
So I kind of put in bold here one of Cronenberg's themes and kind of the things that I pulled from it is there are those who prefer reality and those who prefer games or alternate reality, and how this motif has been kind of scattered throughout science fiction pieces for more than 100 years, and even finding itself in contemporary kind of this.
Totally.
So it's not even, I feel like it's the idea of wanting to escape reality, which even Cronenberg, you were saying, like, how interesting is it for us to go into these dark rooms,
right,
and our dark fantasies and like be alone, but that's in itself kind of outside of reality.
Right.
It's choosing to go into this.
It's trying to use the screen as an outlet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I don't know if you noted too the two-headed dragon in the very beginning, which we see later at the
Where does it first show up? Because
pretty early on. I want to say it's like a 10-15 minute mark. It's before they get to the gas station to meet gas, or like right when they're meeting gas. So just the idea of when we enter this film, like, are we even in reality to start with? Because then we see the dragons later when they're at the restaurant. So it's kind of, I was curious if you thought...
Right, it does show up at the gas station, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I was curious of when you thought we entered reality or entered the game in this film.
That's a great question, because gas definitely feels like a game character.
Yeah.
Which
stop points.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I almost, if I had to pinpoint it, it feels to me like, don't they go to a motel before they go to gas?
Want to know where that motel's featured?
Where is it?
In Schitt's Creek. That's the Rosebud Motel.
No,
if you go back and watch it, it's basically just add Rosebud at the top.
Oh
that is
my God.
The Rosebud Motel in Schitt's Creek.
I'm obsessed.
Isn't that so cool? I yelped, which gives a whole new meaning to the word, to the phrase, "Ew, David."
Ew, David. I have such a burning passion for Schitt's Creek. It's my God,
there
that's
you go.
a
It's
great
an
tidbit. What a crossover! Well, and I guess also, Schitt's Creek, Canadian show.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure even though this was produced by Dimension, I'm sure they probably shot it in Canada.
Yeah.
So
they filmed for 2 months, and they filmed mostly in Toronto.
Interesting.
So,
okay, there you go. Yeah. That's so funny. Oh my God.
So you'll never look at Schitt's Creek Motel again. I won't look at it the same again. I know what happened in there.
Now I'm trying to imagine how Moira Rose would pronounce eXistenZ.
eXistenZ. What is that? eXistenZ? David Cronenberg.
David. Darling.
You can let us know how our impressions were.
Please don't.
I want to know. I'm a masochist.
I don't want feedback.
So kind of going off the tech and then into the, speaking of you, David, going into the, like, I have a whole section like body/sexual.
Yeah. I mean, it's David Cronenberg. These are one and the same thing.
I know. The man loves
putting holes in things.
He loves...
And then putting things in the holes he's put in things.
Yeah. He loves creating holes, more holes.
And then filling
putting
them.
more things in.
Yeah. Getting the holes infected.
So yeah, there's this whole like sensual overtone. I got a quote from not me personally. I wish.
One day.
I found a quote.
Cronenberg, if you're listening.
Can I get a quote? He says, "As usual, Peter, who's the cinematographer, and me, the lighting is instinctive rather than rational. We grope towards the look, and suddenly, when we realize we've found it, we cling and let it evolve." So
I love
the lighting is proactively sensual, rich, and profound.
Oh, I love
So I think
that.
watching it with the knowledge that there is, I guess I've never paid attention to the lighting in this film in particular.
Interesting.
I feel like I do in Videodrome, but
much more
this
so.
Not so much.
Which I wonder if maybe
not my
that's
point of focus.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe that's partially speaking to the way in which it's kind of being developed organically in response rather than this very pre-planned I mean, I don't know if it's that pre-planned in Videodrome, but it feels much more like it to me. It feels very...
I mean, he did say, like, we find it, we cling to it, and we let it evolve. But it does have this very, like, sultry, misty, cozy, it kind of wraps you up kind of look in a lot of the shots, especially in the bedroom. I feel like you're very enveloped.
It's very enclosing.
Intimate.
That's the word. Yeah.
And then going into intimacy, the pods, the fact that you have to flick the nipples to get it to turn on. So we're starting there first.
Oh yeah, that's baseline. just to get turned on.
To turn it on.
Just to turn it on. Yeah.
So it's even stuff like that. The pods were evolved over 3 months. They started as a baboon head.
What?
Don't ask me.
That I feel like
I had to reread that twice to be like, am I pulling the right information? Started off as which baboons are terrifying.
Baboons are terrifying.
The shape of their skulls are very like sharp and evil looking. Sorry if anyone likes baboons out there.
But like that feels like it has no relationship to the plot in the way that...
Well, that's why they didn't get there.
Okay,
they headed then into like a Picasso stage, to the final, what they're calling the Salvador Dali melting watch state. So it's smooth, flashlight, suggestive of something that's organic and abstract.
That's shocking.
Which good for them. And it is very Salvador Dali looking.
It totally is.
Oh, that's the mic. Hello. Sound effects.
It's those claws, Al. Those claws are coming out.
They're so long. I didn't know how to sleep last night with them because I can't make a fist, and I sleep with little curled up fists in case anyone wants to know.
So funny. We might need to bump up cat people in the watch order since you've got your claws
I need
ready.
Mittens. Little fleshy mittens for Cronenberg.
I'm going to make a mental note to myself for Christmas. Al needs mittens.
Me on the podcast just talking with mittens the whole time. She needs to keep herself safe.
Oh my God.
From herself. But yeah, the Salvador Dali imagery of it, looking at it, it very much is kind of drawn in this way that's like like a little melted cloth.
It totally is, but it's interesting to hear that wasn't there from the beginning because I so associate Cronenberg with this space in which body and technology intersect, where like technology becomes fleshy. And so to picture it as anything but this like smooth, fleshy, jiggly
maybe
thing.
They're trying something new. And
I guess
like,
so. And they were like, no,
go back.
Let's stick to the classics, the Cronen classics.
The Cronen classics. His name works well for everything.
Yeah, I'm having too much fun with that.
Cronenberg's when he viewed the pod for the first time, he's
what I wouldn't have given to be a fly on the wall.
Well, because he said they're possessively beautiful.
Oh,
the man loves a pun. Isn't that so cute?
I love him so much.
Can you imagine you make something and like that was his reaction, like nailed it.
Yeah.
Job done.
I feel like it's so often the case though. Horror people are dad joke people.
Yeah.
This is a thing. Yeah. I think,
sure.
And it goes back to that conversation from earlier about like the best horror and the best, I think, horror directors don't take themselves or their work too seriously.
Yeah.
There's that.
You gotta think you're in a room just nerding out over like latex and plastics.
I mean,
and
you're making a video game console that gets turned on by flicking its nipples.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to laugh at yourself. Yeah.
You got jokes. So we can kind of delve into the more, I think, visceral imagery of like the body. So I think, like we said earlier, Pikel's a virgin when it comes to tech.
Yeah.
Even stating that he has to overcome the fear of having his body penetrated, which he outright says.
By surgery.
Yeah, by just in case you guys didn't know, by surgery.
No homo.
Yeah, he basically said that.
Which I just love Jude Law's delivery. Like he really...
He's also got like a little bit of a Canadian accent in it.
Yeah.
I don't know, the emphasis on some of the words. I was like, so.
And I also noticed as the film goes on, right towards kind of the denouement, as we're about to discover what happens, his accent starts slipping. Which is... incredible.
The internet called that out too.
But I think it's intentional because it's like we're starting to see that the characters, they're about to come out of the game. And we see that the Jude Law in real life has a British accent. So it's like the person's real self is coming back in, which I thought was really interesting. So maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but to me it worked.
I'm sure I think I would hope they would call him out on that.
Because it was so pristine throughout the beginning of it, for it to then just fall apart in the last scene. I think it's intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was funny going from being virgin and then
Mhm.
going to see gas to get his port put in. And I literally wrote in all caps, his back is so arched in that
Yep.
chair when he get, and
The way he like
and then he goes,
poses.
I love it. He's like, no.
Okay,
I love it.
I also am I the only one who finds Willem Dafoe incredibly hot in this movie? Okay, good. Great to hear, because
he is beautiful, man.
I was showing Al before we started the recording. This is the first time that I've been moved to put emojis in my notes.
Did you put them around Willem Dafoe?
It was all around Willem Dafoe. It's particularly
he deserves them.
The I like your script. I want to be in it.
Oh yeah.
I was just like,
you're like, yes, please. I have a script.
Yeah. Like as a director, I was just like, this is all of my favorite things.
I'm just gonna hit rewind.
Just watch this a few more times.
He gets lubed by essentially WD-40, but it's called eXistenZ. So it's only a couple. Is that what
the name is?
So it's only a couple letters and numbers different.
So funny. It also kind of looks like a chapstick, which is weird.
Yeah, it looks dirty.
It looks real.
I feel like that's what infected his little porthole. We even have imagery of Allegra licking her 2 fingers and pressing into his port, saying it wants action.
Yep.
Which I guess she wasn't wrong.
She wasn't wrong. But
there's a lot. The body imagery in this is intense in a way that they acknowledge it in this one, and the way they don't acknowledge it in Videodrome, which makes it more uncomfortable.
It's very meta. It's very, and normally when there are those kind of fourth wall breaking moments, it lets the tension down. Here, it somehow builds it up.
Oh, it makes it so much worse. I'm like, no. We don't need to say what we're all thinking.
I know.
We don't need to say it. It wants action. No.
We do it again. It wants action.
Again. Say nothing.
Yeah. I mean, even when they first go to the motel together, she's like, we're going to have an intimate moment. And it's just, they're so calling out everything that they're doing.
Yeah, you're waiting for it. She also sticks the umbilical cord, which they call umbies, and says, like, you're humming already. I hate it.
I hated that.
I'm getting uncomfy. I'm like itching the back of my head right now. I like hate it.
It's a good thing you have those claws. It's, I'm sure, going to help with the itches.
They have the micropods. I thought was the game within the game aspect, which is like the full penetration moment of like he's not only now not a virgin with tech, but he's entered this world where he's like fully immersed.
The world has entered him.
Yeah, the world has entered him. And I noted when he's at the scene at the restaurant, kind of the moment where his innocence is lost in that. We kind of see it where kind of like
this is at the Chinese restaurant?
The Chinese restaurant, yeah.
What a great scene. And I noticed, sorry to interrupt, but I noticed that when we first enter the game and you go into the game store, there's an ad right next to the counter for a game called Chinese Restaurant. Will you survive?
There's also an ad for the car crash one, which is there's like a hit and run game in there too, which is a nod to Crash.
That's so and even this is a Videodrome note that I missed earlier, but in Videodrome, when Max is running down the hallway at his job to like kill his colleagues, he runs past a poster that I had to pause on the frame to see what it was, because it's called Screamers, but it looks exactly like the poster for Scanners. So it's like a little Cronenberg making a Cronenberg joke moment that I thought was really fun.
That's so fun.
Yeah,
I would be doing the same thing.
Oh my God, yeah. Again, poking fun at himself and and left.
Yeah,
it's
and
great.
I'm sure like the art department, production design team are like making these things and trying to make him giggle. Yeah, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, trying to make him be like, it's positively wonderful.
Yeah, it's I hope people say that about our podcast one day.
One day, positively. Leave us a review saying that. We'll love you forever.
So yeah, I think he like loses his innocence.
His innocence, his virginity.
Yeah, he kind of acknowledges it too, where he's like, that's not me. That's just the video game me. And it's like, but no, I really think that's...
This is something else that I wanted to ask you about, is how often do you believe them when they're saying this is something my character's doing, not me?
Oh, not at all. That's I have a reality versus virtual reality portion. And
I'll hold it for that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. I don't at all.
Yeah.
Any other body kind of notes that you had? Those were my main ones.
Let's see.
I just thought it was interesting because it's a really unique commentary on how our relationship is with like pornography even and video games too, the maybe desensitization of it.
Which I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that that's probably something that didn't exist at the time this movie was made, or was like just starting to exist, that now like VR porn and like game porn is like
it's really everywhere.
Whole industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we have OnlyFans. We have so many things where it's so accessible and so normal. I mean, even Twitter now.
Totally.
Which I refuse to call X.
No.
Twitter, you could just go on, there's just porn. So the accessibility of it and the desensitization.
Totally. Yeah.
Hard word. Is I just thought, again, for 1999, for 1983, just having commentary that's so just now.
Well, and like, again, I feel like I've been bringing up Columbine on a lot of episodes, but I feel like that too is like a thing. I'm sorry. But, you know, in terms of like the debate over whether video games and media are causing violence, which is something that gets brought up with Cronenberg's work in particular so much, and that I think he's responding to in so much of his work, it feels so fascinating that both of these are movies pre that event that was so foundational to our relationship to that debate.
Yeah.
Or at least it was, eXistenZ at least was made before that happened. I don't know what point in 1999 it was released, but
April.
Oh, so it was the same month as Columbine too.
Oh no.
That might have also not done
Helped
great
it.
for it.
Yeah, people probably like, that's not what I want.
Yeah.
I didn't even think April.
April 1999. Unless I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
It was still in the same.
It was that
time frame.
Yeah. Ew. Moving on. I think the only body note that I had, have you ever shot a gun, Al?
No, and I don't want to. I probably should, to just know how to handle one, in case. I always am like, there's going to be a scenario where I'm going to get kidnapped, and then I'm going to need, like, the gun gets kicked to me, and I have to grab it, and I'm not going to know what to do. But no, guns truly terrify me on like a very like I don't know. They're I mean, they are. They're really powerful things.
Yeah.
I even held during film school. I remember my friend got really, really well. Like, he bought some really, really well made guns for his film that he was shooting, and he like asked me to hold them. They had like, at that time they had, I don't even think he had anything on them, made them look fake. I was so freaked out. I started sweating immediately. I was like, I'm good. Here, take it back.
Yeah. No, I
like,
totally
are you
get
sure
it.
these? He's like, they're so fake. Like, they're so fake. You're good. And I was like,
don't trust it.
Have you shot a gun?
I have. A friend took me to a shooting range in Washington, and I had more fun than I expected to.
Yeah.
But because of that, I was watching The Tooth Gun, and I just could not get out of my head. I kept obsessing over how hard it would be to shoot a tooth gun because of the torque on.
Yeah, where would it go? You have to be real close.
Well, and also just like it would be completely impossible to predict the spin because of the shape of a tooth.
Just hits you right back.
Yeah.
It just comes right back around.
Just boomerangs. Yeah.
Oh, and when he takes out his little like teeth, he like finishes which is called, it's officially, they never mention it in the film, but it's called the gristle gun.
Ew, I love that.
Isn't that great?
That's so good.
I mean,
it's again Cronenberg and his names, man.
Yeah, the gristle gun. It's actually in a lot of top 10 like body horror kind of
like weapons.
Yeah, or like elements, like special effects. It's kind of always in a list. People love the gristle gun.
That's so good. Ugh. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I wrote down the line, seems most everything used to be something else, which I was thinking a lot about the idea of like palimpsests, like paper that used to have one thing written on it that now has another thing written on it, but you can see the outline of the previous text. Like, and I was thinking that feels like a good image for a lot of Cronenberg's work, is this idea of this thing that used to be something else, but you still see the outline of the previous thing in it. And I was thinking about so many of his weapons, the gun hand, the bomb hand, the TV that turns into a mouth in Videodrome. Like so much of the horror of Cronenberg is this idea of the thing that used to be something else, you can still see the outline of its previous form. Which
because it's something relatable to it.
Totally. Well, because like the experience of being human is an experience of transformation and like becoming something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
I don't know if you noted too, I was trying to like I don't know if you noticed in the opening credits, just even the fact that there was all this fleshy layers, it kind of looked like a world, but it looked like skin. And then there were also designs kind of overlaid over it, which I'm assuming were from something.
I noted that down. I was
But
like,
that kind
what
of
are
maybe
we
nods to
totally? I was like, what are we seeing? Is it like reptile skin? Is it animal skin? Is it paper? And it's like it's all of these things. It's a palimpsest.
Yeah. Palimpsest.
Yeah.
Word of the day.
Yeah, palimpsest.
So kind of diving from that, my next chunk is about like reality versus virtual reality and how I kind of wrote both are technically realities just in different ways.
Totally.
Based on perception.
Especially because as they start to interweave, one affects and shifts the other. There's that like reality bleed.
Yeah. I have a quote here from, I want to say it's Denise, the costume designer. She wrote that there are no specific distinct looks in or out of the game. We were at liberty to do what we wanted. Nothing had to be logical because they were in the game. Which I'm wondering too is like, again, were we in the game to start?
Right.
I say yes.
Yeah, it feels like it. It feels like it at the very least from the church scene, from the second that the pods go in, essentially, in that first testing scene. It feels like
I think it's even before that.
No, I guess you're right, because then we're already in that scene introduced to Allegra as the game designer, which we then find out is within the game itself. So yeah, I guess the whole thing.
Yeah.
Up until we come out, if you even believe that we've come out at the end.
Yeah. I also found out some production-y things sprinkled in here. It mostly, they had it mostly take place in the countrysides because Allegra is trying to kind of keep her game secret. You see a lot of small operation setups like the gas station, the small church. But I also feel like a lot of video games are set up in that way too, where it's kind of leaving this big city and going into these countrysides. So I think that adds a different element of just surroundings.
Yeah.
Because that church setup is so
it's an odd place
jarring.
And I noted that too, is like it seems like if you're doing a focus group for a VR game, a church is
in like the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, a church in the middle of nowhere is an odd location to choose.
Yeah. It's also very like cult-like in a sense of like the cult tech group of people.
And it feels like the game is the god, right?
Yeah.
Art god. Or what was the word you said? Isten or the
Isten.
Yes, Isten.
God.
Yeah, God.
It's Hungarian for God.
That's so interesting.
So cool.
Yeah, art god.
Interesting commentary. Is it interesting commentary on one's reality persona versus who they are in real life? I think, which is something that even like I struggle with today, having this, what you're posting online, what you're putting online,
totally
is way too familiar nowadays. Where again, where does that bleed come from? Because I think even with content creators, you do it for so long that that persona that you are online is eventually going to bleed into who you are when you just have interactions with people.
As in a Cronenbergian world, there are going to be holes punctured in the boundaries from one to the other.
I kind of wrote some different quotes. There was this cool website I found. Let me scroll down to my sources. It was called TV Tropes.
Oh, I love TV Tropes.
Okay,
it's
I just
so good.
discovered it.
Oh, and you're going to have so much fun.
TVTropes.org if anyone wants to deep dive.
So good.
In there, they kind of had some cool definitions of things. One of which I was saying earlier, which is like a reality bleed, which instead of being like the term down the rabbit hole, a reality bleed is which a version of reality is gradually overwritten by another. So it kind of comes to you versus you kind of going down this thing. It's kind of bleeding into your existence.
I love that. That's really a helpful term to have, because that's like what happens in a lot of my scripts, but I didn't know that there was a specific word.
TV Trope kind of lists a lot of these out. It also had deep immersion gaming as well. So like the virtual reality game has so many layers that the characters really never know if they're still in the game or not. Which they even say at the end.
Yeah,
the
totally.
Guy is like, are we still in the game? Because their reaction too at the end of this film, both films end in a very similar way.
On this very kind of, it could be interpreted in many different ways. At the end of the film, what's real, what's not, what's actually happened.
Yeah. Yeah, so those were some fun terms that I learned. And then I kind of put down a quote from earlier where Pikel's kind of talking about how they're both stumbling around together in a uniformed world whose rules and objects are like unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And Allegra is like, that sounds like my game, all right.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, that sounds like a game that's not easy to market to anybody. And she's like, but
that.
it's a game everyone's already playing.
Mm-hmm.
So just that idea of like, this isn't a new concept. This is a new idea. We're living in this world already. Why would this be hard?
It also felt like this wonderful little Cronenberg clapping back to the studios moment of like his films, I'm sure, are very hard to market, especially something like eXistenZ that's like kind of high concept, but it's a high concept that's real tough to explain.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do a log line for this film?
Oh my God, I can't even
like
imagine.
it would be a nightmare.
Yeah, how do you pitch this?
How do you pitch this? And yet it is touching on realities that we all experience.
Yeah.
It's a game we're already playing.
Cronenberg, stop it, you.
I love him so much.
I wrote participating in a game was an afterthought. When we began, this is a quote from him. I don't know what I'm saying. So he kind of identified this as we were participating in a game as an afterthought in this film. And when he began writing the screenplay, he actually never intended to enter the game.
Oh,
which I think is really weird that he would start.
That's very hard to picture.
How many minutes in are we before we're...
Again, like I think from the beginning. Yeah.
But very quickly. So he was quoted saying, I thought it would be a movie about a game designer on the run from fanatics. Then as I started to write it, I was desperate to get into the game myself and thought the audience would want this as well. So he decided to change it up. And it seems
so interesting.
Yeah. So it started, I can't even imagine what that script would be if we never entered. I don't think it would hit.
No, it wouldn't. And it would be very hard to write because you'd be constantly fighting that impulse to enter the game, I think.
It's also kind of going back to what you were saying where he kind of edits himself. I think his ability to look at his works and go back and critique like what would the consumer want, what would the person want, and putting
again very audience focused, very constantly aware of what it would look like from the outside.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool to know he did it. I didn't realize it until you started talking about that, and I was like, wait, I have notes about his change of stuff. So he was also quoted saying, it seemed to me that what people are really doing in computer and video games is trying to get closer and closer to fusing themselves with the game, and that the idea of the game would plug right into your nervous system made perfect sense to him. So he kind of took it one step further. And so instead of putting on like glasses and gloves, which is a crude attempt to fuse your nervous system with the game, so he kind of went further and just went the Cronenberg route.
Yeah.
How close can I get? Oh, port in your back.
Would you get a port?
Absolutely not.
Be honest.
That's me thinking. I'm like, maybe I would. I don't know. I would have to see.
I would.
Would you?
Hands down, absolutely would.
I guess I would. I probably would because I maladaptive daydream all the time.
Oh, yeah, I'm also a big Sims player, which I feel like is eXistenZ all over, unfortunately.
It really, really... I broke my back a few years ago, so I think any back-related thing is really hard for me to get over at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. That'll do
it. If I could get over that, probably... But that's a really hard stopping point for me. Is the fleshy port. I also sensory that little umbilical cord. She's twirling it around her foot at one point. I just don't know if I could sensorily, unless it felt like real flesh. It looked a little silicone-y.
It did look a little silicone-y.
If it's like real, I don't know.
Would it be better or worse if it's like real flesh?
Better.
Interesting. I almost feel like it might be
better.
Worse.
Would it sweat is the question. Would it get sweaty?
Definitely worse if it sweats.
What's it made of? Is it made out of humans? Is it made out
of? Is it made out of reptiles? Which that was also really interesting to me. I felt like reptiles were a very careful choice. Because, if it had been mammals, I think our immediate reaction would have been more one of pity and sadness and like upset and potentially even rage at the filmmaker from some people.
You're not wrong, because I was really mad about the dog being strapped with guns
absolutely.
at the end.
Well, and I saw there's definitely like no animals were harmed. And I think I remember seeing actually an interview with Cronenberg talking about how upset he is by movies that actually harm animals. Apparently that's like,
I love him for
he
that.
really likes animals. So, which makes it all the more.
Don't watch Milo and Otis.
Yeah.
That's really everyone's warning.
So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting touch to choose reptiles, because I think they're an animal that we, on kind of a very
we kind of don't see them as
reptile brain level, we see them more as threats, or we're kind of more, we have a disgust reaction to them.
Yeah, it also, I think this film was one of his first films where he used CG in it.
Oh, for the two-headed lizard. What else is CG? Is that it?
That's all all the guns and effects, the pew-pews.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but the guns themselves are real.
The guns are real. But you can tell the little like
pew, pew. Yeah.
That's how guns sound.
Pew, pew. Cute.
But yeah, so I think this was the first time that he had did that.
Interesting. Oh, that's fascinating.
He kind of had to. Yeah, especially with dealing with animals in that way.
And I think pretty good CG for this time period. I was, especially, it did better for me at night than in the daytime. But oftentimes my problem with CG is that things feel like they don't have weight to them. And the lizard did, I think maybe partially just because it's a small creature.
Yeah.
That didn't bug me as much as it sometimes does, even with modern CG.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't great, but I felt like, because we're in a video game anyways, it kind of, the suspension of belief there was okay.
Yeah, it's a forgiving narrative framework for CG to exist within.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I kind of have a couple commentaries, but the main one was, this film made me think of Inception.
Me too.
Okay.
Very much.
I was like,
yeah.
I like the idea of not knowing reality. I was like, did it pave the way for it? I don't know. That might be a stretch, but
it very much. I mean, first of all, we know that, what's his face? Oh my God, I'm forgetting. No.
Leo DiCaprio.
Inception director. Oh my God.
You asked me the question.
Somebody stall. Anyway, what's his face? Was it Nolan? I feel like it was. Yes, it was Nolan. Okay, thank God.
When someone, just so if you ever need my help, never ask me a question.
Never turn to you.
Because I blank.
I will excuse myself by saying I fucking hate Christopher Nolan, so I've just tried to block his existence out of my brain. But we know that he loves. He's a big stealer. Many of his movies are based on other people's movies, and so that would not shock me. Yeah. That's a rant for another time. But
I was waiting for you to go. I was like, I'm buckled up. I'm ready.
Oh, I'm gonna contain myself. That'll take me way too long, but we'll get there.
I'm running into some fun facts now, a couple which I gave earlier, but I don't know if you noted that, and I didn't realize this either until I read it, because I think it just does such a good job of building the world. But there's no computers, no monitors, no TVs, telephones, no clocks.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And that the costume department has no running shoes, no watches, no suits, no jackets, ties, or jewelry. So it's, again, this very like organic environment that which probably adds to we're in the game.
Totally.
From start to finish. And yeah, so for the first time ever, Cronenberg departed from his usual in-camera style. That's what it was. In-camera style to add the computer-generated effects with Alliance is who he worked with, which is a Toronto-based visual effects company, Toybox, and they worked with Isaac to do all the special effects.
Fascinating.
Which was, I think that's probably what adds to the element of realism for you too. I think it's because they worked with him to be like, no, this doesn't work. Here's texture. You need this. This is maybe the materials I would have done to make this. How would you help? So I think that was
that's good that they had him to kind of bridge the gap between the two. The effects departments.
Yeah. I feel like if you're going to depart from your normal style, bring in the person that you usually use.
Very much. Although I still, I love how tactile and old school Cronenberg is, and I love it when he sticks as much as possible to avoiding CG.
I think that's why why we love him.
Yeah.
It's because it's timeless in that sense. Like, these films don't feel dated for me because of those effects.
And I think body horror in particular is a genre that is very dependent on in-camera effects, on practical work.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like body horror. If it's just, I'm like, that's just gore.
Yeah,
at
exactly.
that point.
And there's a really interesting distinction there, right? Because it's like, it's not just about the blood.
Yeah.
It's not just about the guts. It's about, to me, I think body horror in particular has a lot to do with skin and organs.
You know what I love too in this is gonna be and because there's a scene in Chucky too in the new show. Not really a spoiler, but he gets like his jaw blown off. But his little tongue. And at the end of Videodrome, the guy when he's just like it's the close up and his little tongue is just writhing around. I'm like, that's body gore.
That's the good stuff. Yeah.
Just a little
yeah. It's so good.
I don't know what body gore is to you, but for me, it's the tongue.
It's all about the tongue. Skin, organs, tongue.
In that order. At one point during the movie's development, it was with an American studio. It was with MGM. And Cronenberg left that studio, took the project elsewhere because he wanted to cast Jennifer Jason Leigh in the movie.
And they didn't want her?
They didn't want her because, quote, they said she's like in little art movies that don't make money.
Oh, fuck that.
Right?
I mean, I understand that neither of these movies made money, but
like that's how I hear them saying this. Me. And he's like, okay. So she was actually finishing shooting her role in Eyes Wide Shut. And then she took this role instead because they had to do some reshoots and it wasn't going to work out. So she's like, no, I'm going to stay with eXistenZ.
Wow.
But
she's
that's
amazing.
So awfully good in this.
She really is.
But imagine being like, no.
To Eyes Wide
pick?
Shut. Yeah, that's incredible.
So good for her because, again, I don't know what they would have done, to be fair.
No, she's perfect for the role, which that was something I was thinking a lot about. I wrote down at the beginning of the movie, like, oh, it's so satisfying to see a female game designer. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh, it's because that's in the game.
Yeah.
And in the real world,
fake.
in the real world, it's some guy named like Yevgeny Norish.
Yeah, he's kind of a prick.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
Just like an asshole white dude. Of course it is.
Yeah, of course.
Which like also felt like very, I know many people feel differently, but I have always really loved Cronenberg's female characters. And I feel like he gives an attention and a humanity and also a grossness to women that a lot of male filmmakers shy away from.
Yeah, they're not super soft characters. No. They're very much forthright.
And bodily. Yeah. Like there's like a carnality that I really appreciate.
That's a great word for that.
Yeah. With Debbie Harry too. There's
absolutely. Yeah. Because they're also, I mean, they're obviously placed in this very like sexualized lens, but I think they own it in a way where they're not just like these like damsels. I don't know. That's not the right word.
It feels to me like they are getting as much from their sexualization.
Yes. Yeah. They're getting theirs too.
They're getting theirs too. Exactly.
As they should.
Yes.
How do you think this film did with critics? Curious of like what you think the opinion was.
I like it so much that my instinct is that it didn't do well because oftentimes movies that I have like a really intense affinity for, particularly horror movies that I have a really intense affinity for, were underappreciated by critics. So that's my guess is going to be that it maybe had a reappraisal recently, but that at the time the reception was not great.
It was actually generally positive.
Oh, good.
So it wasn't refreshing. Like they weren't raving. Yeah, I was gonna say here it might be the first for you.
Fair.
So it, like I said, it failed at the box office, but critics didn't really hate it.
Interesting.
It has a 74% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Not bad for horror.
So it's like a 6.6 out of 10. And then Roger Ebert gave it a 3 out of 4 stars.
Oh, good. That's refreshing.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised with that. Again, he kind of just noted that after the release of The Matrix, he kind of compared the two, and I think that's why it got a little bit less.
I wonder if it would have gotten like a 3.5 on its own.
Maybe. I think so. I think there was just so much conversation around The Matrix that it did fall a little bit shy, especially being directly compared to, which is unfair.
It's not fair. It's not fair.
Don't do that. But he called it like it has some of its best effects involving gooey,
Mm,
indescribable organic things, which is
that's
a direct
Cronenberg all over.
It's like, yeah,
It's
no, you got it.
It's really interesting though, because I know he kind of famously never really liked David Lynch, and to me, Lynch and Cronenberg are very much
Weird,
the
bizarre.
and also like that's something David Lynch also has is like grotesque organic stuff, and so
Yeah.
to me, it's interesting that one works for him where one
I
didn't.
wonder where the bee flies there.
Yeah, I feel like there might have been some sort of a personal thing with David Lynch
Yeah.
for Ebert.
That's got to be personal.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
if you,
I mean,
like
he held grudges. He was a grudgy man.
Yeah, well,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
He was allowed to not he was allowed to be, but,
Was
like,
he?
he picked that lane, he stayed in it
That's
hard.
true. That's true. He committed to the bit.
He committed to the bit.
Roger Ebert committing to the bit.
It won a bunch of awards too. I kind of have them noted. I might just put them online. But it did get at some of the festivals, like the Genie Awards in Amsterdam, Fantastic Film Festival. It won like the Silver Scream.
Ooh,
So it did get some notability
that's
there, I think,
good. I'm
within
glad.
it. So I think people that like Cronenberg appreciated
That makes
Cronenberg.
sense.
And
That makes
then
sense.
again, it kind of just fell by the wayside. So that's eXistenZ for me. How was the first, like, how did you feel in compared to Videodrome?
You know, this was one of the Cronenberg movies that I liked the most right off the bat. Like it
Really?
really
Oh,
it hit
yay.
me. I don't know if it was the place in my life that I'm at or watching
Yeah.
it right after Videodrome or what it was,
You're
but
already in the mindset.
I was already in the mindset. It really I absolutely loved it and have been thinking about it since. And it just really it really worked for me on a lot of different levels. I thought it was very like masterfully done.
It's an easy watch too, I think. I think for people
Surprisingly.
that, again, I haven't seen all of Cronenberg's films, but I do feel like in comparison to Videodrome, this is a lighter watch in that
I
sense.
would say if you haven't seen any Cronenberg and you're trying to decide between the two, I would almost say watch eXistenZ
Yeah,
first
it's a
and
little
then go
lighter.
to Videodrome.
Eases you in
Yeah,
to the world.
yeah, a little bit, kind of.
Yeah.
As it gives you as much lubrication as he ever does to enter his hole.
No. Enter the Cronin Nussy.
The Cronin crannies?
The Cronin crannies. That's a nicer way to say that. I probably just horrified so many people.
Oh my
Don't listen to this
God.
podcast without headphones. We should have warned
This is
you
not
at the start.
This is an NSFW horror podcast for sure.
Absolutely. We'll warn you on social media, I promise.
Yeah, which I think will also hold true for our next. Well, I guess we're doing Cabin in the Woods, Cabin Fever next.
Yeah, we figure we're in November. We're all like
Mhm.
kind of hunkered down. We got our
Mhm.
first snowfall here like last week in
We
Santa Fe.
did, yeah.
So yeah, I think
And I
we're
think
diving into the cabins.
as we head into the holiday season and all get stir crazy with our families, we felt like a cabin pairing would be appropriate.
Yeah. So yeah, Cabin in the Woods and Cabin Fever. I'll be covering Cabin
Yeah.
Fever, obviously.
Yes.
Wait, no, I'm going back. I'm the older one.
Oh, look at that.
Look at me.
That's true. I'm proud
Not
of
that
you,
far
Al.
back. What was that, like 2002?
Something like that.
Yeah.
That sounds. We'll call it 2002.
So yeah, that's our next one. So if you haven't already seen them, watch them, and then you can hang out with us.
Yeah.
So
With
that,
thank you, Al. This was a really wonderful double feature to watch.
This was really fun.
It was a particularly
Very gross, very fun.
Yeah. Very gross, very fun, very haunting. Obviously, my grandpa enjoyed it too.
Yeah,
R.I.P.
Just playing his tunes.
Playing along. Playing along with the game.
Yeah.
So thank you all for listening to Splice and Splatter. And you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Splice and Splatter Pod to stay in touch, see what we're up to, follow along with us as we watch and share tidbits.
We're posting a lot on TikTok.
We are posting a lot on TikTok.
If you don't want to watch full episodes on our Patreon,
you can still get little bits of our faces.
You can see
there.
our horrified faces.
Yeah. I think particularly for last week's episode with Ringu, you should at least check out. Yeah. And this podcast is a High Garden Entertainment production presented by the Jean Cocteau Cinema, owned by author George R.R. Martin here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You can find out more about the Jean Cocteau Cinema online at jeancocteaucinema.com or on Instagram at Jean Cocteau Cinema. And I want to give a special thank you to our amazing producer, Warren Langford. And the man behind the camera, Travis Fowler.
I'm a hockey announcer all of a sudden.
Yes, both of these guys have been, I think, in desperate need of stretching as we've gone on about these movies for much longer than we usually do. So let's give their poor legs a break. I also want to shout out Theodore Schafer, our wonderful composer, the man behind the music.
Yes.
And until then,
thanks for taking that over.
Yeah, I'm here to make your life easier. This has been Splice and Splatter with your hosts,
Al
and Siena, and we'll see you next time for more horror and gore.
Bye.
Bye. We'll be right back.